All right. We're live. Hey, everybody. Kira Bachland here. I'm super excited to be here again with Kira Sutherland. She's a naturopath and medical astrologer. And we'll get into, do not doubt that we'll get into medical astrology. It's kind of hard not to.
Yeah, it is.
But what I wanted to pick your brain about intermittent fasting or fasting and exercise or training aligned with the menstrual cycle. And as we speak about cycles, I mean, there's multiple cycles in our life and in our world and in our galaxy, right? I'm sure it will move into very interesting arenas. And so thank you, first of all, for joining me. You are technically on vacation and you're joining. So thank you.
It's all right. It's the afternoon, right? Normally when you and I are talking, it's early morning for me in Australia, but I'm up in Canada. So we're almost on the same time zone for once. So it's easy.
Yes, thankfully. And you've been enjoying some good cross-country skiing, you said?
Cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, snowshoeing. I'm in like a little ski village. So I'm loving it for, 6 weeks of kind of decompression. So starting new year, starting to get back to regular life. So this is kind of my first kickoff, actually. I would say this is my first official thing for the year. So
nice. Yeah. Well, this is definitely one of my favorite of my work tasks. Oh my gosh. Talking health and wellness and all that is it's got to be my favorite. You know, it's not work, it's fun. And I thought, as I've been thinking about in my own experience, trying to train, learning about intermittent fasting, how healthy it is for your metabolism, for the waistline, for mental health and sharpness. But as a woman who's cycling, it can be super challenging. And it reminds me also about when I'm exercising regularly, ideally, or even training. And I thought, who can I talk to about this who I'm sure would really get it? Because like you said, you're out skiing, you're active.
Yeah.
What's your background as far as,
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Sure. So I'm American born. So if you're hearing that accent, I am American, but I'm also Australian. I've lived pretty much my whole adult life in Australia. I am an Australian naturopath, not a North American naturopath. So that means I'm not a doctorate of naturopathy. I'm an undergrad degree in naturopathy, which means I'm a naturopath, a herbalist, I should say. I'm an herbalist, a homeopath, and a nutritionist. So I have qualifications or degrees in those. And then my post-grad qualifications are sports nutrition, which is why I'm comfortable doing the conversation we're having. So post-grad sports nutrition. And then, as we've talked about before, and some people will know, I am also a practicing astrologer, but I specialize in health or medical astrology. So I just keep studying, basically.
And I've surmised from our past talks and following you on Instagram that you have a history also in athletics and training.
Yes. Yeah. So I was that sporty person that did absolutely everything I could my whole life. And then in my, I guess, late 20s, early 30s, I started doing endurance sports. So I've done multiple Ironman triathlons, half Ironmans, ultra endurance events, marathons. So now a lot of, I haven't done triathlon in a few years, but a lot of running, trail running, and a lot of skiing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I am the antithesis. And I think what's a great combination is I come from a background where I chose to play softball because I knew that as a kid, I'm like, even then you knew that exercise was good for you. But I'm like, the furthest I have to run around is around the bases. And I can do that. And it's extra motivation because you got like a home run or something.
Yeah.
So I come from the other end where I had real challenges with my body. And so hence, what is the deal with intermittent fasting and how do you align that, whether you're an athlete or let's say you're an everyday person just doing regular exercises? What do you recommend to clients?
Yeah, so intermittent fasting has gone crazy over the last probably 10 years. It's been around a lot longer than that, but it as we say, pop nutrition, pop popular things come and go. So I'm a fan of intermittent fasting, but I'm not a fan of everyone kind of applying the same ideas to intermittent fasting. There's the issue that a large body of the research on intermittent fasting has actually only been done on men, or it's only been done on obese individuals. And there's nothing wrong with studying both of those groups, but it's left out a lot of people, especially, I mean, we have the issue in science where a lot of research has just been done on men or those assigned male at birth. Because there was this worry about testing on women because they, might not know they're pregnant, or because our cycles make us a lot harder and more expensive to follow in clinical trials. So the thing with intermittent fasting is a lot of people out there hear about how to do it, or they say, do this really. There's a bunch of different styles of intermittent fasting, which we can go over if you need, but just the tight window of eating that a lot of people are doing, everybody, how do I say this? Not everyone responds the same way to different tight windows. And we all have very different bodies, different phenotypes, different genotypes, different genetics. And some of us will do better on a tight window and other of us won't. And a lot of the suggestions around intermittent fasting where they're like, just eat 6 hours a day or just eat 8 hours a day. There is the anomaly that a female will feel good doing that and have good results. But for a lot of females, or I'm generally going to say female, but I'm also referring to assigned female at birth. A lot of us don't respond to really tight windows because we are, with our cycles and with our hormones, we are too sensitive, and our cortisol, our body goes into a stress response if we do too tight of a window. And when our cortisol goes high, it puts the brakes on fat loss. And so you meet these couples that are like, oh yeah, we decided to intermittent fast at the beginning of the year. And the male has lost all this weight in 6 or 8 weeks. And the female, the male's lost, if you need me to do pound, the male's got like, I've lost 15 pounds. And the female's like, I've lost 2. Mm-hmm. And they're like, but the women will typically be like, I'm broken. Something must be wrong with me. I must have done it wrong. And they haven't done it wrong. They probably followed it just as well, but their body hasn't responded to the style of intermittent fasting that they've tried. So with IF, as I refer to it, most people say, you really have to play with what the eating window is that works for your body, because we all are different levels of sensitivity to fasting for too long sets up this stress response. It can cause problems with our female hormones, irregular cycles, missing cycles. And so we just need to be more cautious, really.
I've noticed too, when I was extending intermittent fasting into the later morning, most of my day, I would feel very anxious and even on the verge of like kind of hangry feeling, even if I had already eaten. It already set the tone where I for the day in that way.
A lot of, it's easy to not eat in the morning, right? Because when we wake up, our cortisol is high, melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin is the hormone that helps us sleep. Cortisol is our stress hormone, but it also wakes us up. And melatonin and cortisol kind of work on a seesaw to each other. So first thing in the morning, your cortisol is high. And then often we run around and we have caffeine, or we go do exercise, or which both increase our cortisol even more. And cortisol does suppress appetite. So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to do IF and I don't eat until 12 or 1 p.m. But in reality, yes, that can work for the rare female individual, but a lot of people don't feel good doing that. A lot of men feel good doing that, but a lot of women don't get good results because, again, the way to turn cortisol down, remember, cortisol also is suppressing your fat burning. It's suppressing your body's ability to burn fat as a fuel, and it's making you more carb dependent. So the way to turn down cortisol when you wake up is by eating, and specifically by eating carbohydrates. Now, not everyone's going to be wanting large amount of carbohydrates, but often while you're feeling anxious, a lot of women, if they're limiting their carbs, especially in the morning, have that anxious or anxiety feeling. I've met a lot of women like that. Carbohydrates help us produce serotonin, which makes us feel good. And, we get so scared of carbs, and usually earlier in the day is a better time. I'm going to jump sciences here. Our metabolism and our digestive function, we all have circadian rhythms that are sleep-wake cycle, but every organ of the body also has its own rhythm, or, in the 24-hour cycle. So every organ has a circadian rhythm. And our digestive system and how well our insulin works, and we need insulin to take food to where it needs to be, they all work better. Our microbiome works better in the morning to the early afternoon, and our digestive system's function and ability slows down in the evening, which is, opposite where, in North America or Australia where I live, and probably Europe as well, a lot of people eat their big meal at night. Whereas it is true, we are better off eating our bigger meal either at breakfast or at lunch, because our digestive system actually utilizes the nutrients better, and we would be less likely to have a surplus that our body will then choose to store as body fat. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
There's so many directions to go.
I know.
It's such a huge topic. So I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was able to go down 2 sizes in 2 months, which is pretty significant. And that was with, we didn't know it at the time. It wasn't called intermittent fasting, but it was basically, it was a simple routine. It's, of course, choosing more so when to eat, what, of course, but also certain types of exercise. But just on the eating component, it was basically a 12-hour eating time frame. And that worked great. It was super simple. It was workout with a high rep, low to medium weight exercises in the morning before breakfast. And then it was actually oatmeal, lots of carbs, and egg. And I mean, I didn't even have to I wasn't eating sweets. I wasn't drinking alcohol. So that really helped a lot. And along with that general exercise routine, I was exercising quite a bit. I was doing martial arts and Thai boxing at the time in amongst that. But now, as I've in my 30s and now I'm in my early 40s, it's like, okay.
It's a different game.
It's a different game. And, I feel fortunate. I feel good. And I don't feel like it's night and day at this point, but it helped. I respect more these cycles that are going on internally and externally.
Yeah. So 12-hour window, if somebody has never done intermittent fasting and you're a female, I would start with a 12-hour window, right? Because that's the easiest. Just you wake up, don't go a really long time without eating. If you want to go an hour or two before eating, that's fine. But I would say eating by 2 hours after waking, and eat within that 12-hour window. Or if you want to be more adventurous, a 10-hour window. But a lot of women don't do well on less than a 10-hour window. So I play between that 10 and 12-hour window. There was a style of intermittent fasting called, I'm sure it was called 90-90. And it was like, wake up, but don't eat for 90 minutes after you wake, and don't eat for 90 minutes before you go to bed. And it's really, in research, the average person eats 30% of their daily calories after dinner. If we all just stopped, if intermittent fasting is too hard, I would say, my other big thing I do with people is I'm like, you get 3 meals a day, 3 proper meals, no snacks. Snacking is like a modern invention that we don't need. Yes, if you're diabetic, you have blood sugar problems, or you literally, there's certain body types that will need to eat more frequently. But most of us, and those of us that carry extra weight, typically are body types that don't need to snack, but we've just been taught that it's okay to snack. So just go to 3 meals, but have proper meals and do not eat after dinner. Or if you can't, even just stopping eating by 6 p.m., 7 p.m. is phenomenal for the body if you're going to bed at like 9 or 10. I mean, if you're not going to bed till midnight, okay, maybe eat till 8. There's only so many hours you want to be awake without eating. But, there's lots of little ways to do it that aren't that hard. Other styles of intermittent fasting that can be really popular, one of the ones, and I quite like this for people, is the 5-2, or you do a 6-1. So 5-2 is eating normal for 5 days a week, and then 2 days a week you do lower, like extreme lower calorie. And again, you got to make sure, physically you're okay to do this. Check with your doctor, your healthcare practitioner. But people trying to lose weight often do better on a cyclical idea of not always feeling restricted. So people do, normal calories 5 days a week, and then often men do 500 calories a day, and women tend to do 650 calories. But again, some people can't cope with that and they feel terrible. Other people feel amazing. And because as much as people don't want to hear it, weight loss, if that's what people are going for, so fat loss, does have to have a calorie deficiency. It does. That's a law of thermodynamics. You have to be not overeating for your energy expenditure. And we don't, there's a million other things in play, like your stress hormones, your reproductive hormones, everything, but it does come down to calories as well.
It's simple, and I think it's made a little too complex. And I find, yes, like I was saying, in my early 20s, it was like I could do it whenever, and maybe there'd be a couple days where I'd just like totally crash, and then I'd be like back at it. And I wanted to talk to you too, because you're a very motivated person. You're a go-getter. And it's like sometimes when you have that personality, speaking as one as well, you can overdo it. And I've had to learn over time to really follow my cycle. But at the same time, I felt myself almost kind of fighting it, because it was like, I want to be able to do all of this. And then my body would be like, nope, you're going to take a break.
Yeah. And I am a go-getter, and I'm a pretty I am a hyper person. I'm ADHD kind of personality. And if we're talking astrology, I've got all this fire I'm a fiery person, but I actually have to take a lot of time out, and I can't over push. And every decade I hit, that becomes even more prominent. So in my late teens, 20s, I could push through my cycles of tiredness, whatever, and you get away with it. But as your body, I'm 54. I will admit to how old I am. I'll be 55 this year. You're much more aware of those cycles of when you need to rest and when you need to push. And I probably would right now have a really hard time if I went, I want to do another Ironman, because that's a 12-week push cycle that I just don't think my body would do it anymore. And I think there's this beauty in looking at your health and your cycles. And a lot of people that come to naturopaths come because they're burnt out. We're not supposed to say adrenal exhaustion anymore, or whatever it is, but a lot of people, male, female, no matter what sex or gender, a lot of us push the candle too hard, and we burn out and need a lot more rest for a while. And I think all of us, our health would be that much more amazing if we just were okay with that a little bit more. But the way society operates at the moment, there's this, glory in pushing hard. And I think that tide is changing, and we're getting better about it. But especially going back to female cycles, one of my other favorite ways to do fat loss or intermittent fasting or dieting or whatever we're talking about here is, and I know this is a topic you want to get to anyway, I use the female menstrual cycle, and I do a lot, if I have a female client or a client that has a menstrual cycle. We use that for how hard they're going to push exercise wise or weight loss wise. And then we have a relaxation phase. So do you want me to kind of explain this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Please.
So otherwise, because I could hit a monologue, Tara. I just want to make sure. So day one of the menstrual cycle is considered the first day of the cycle, just so everybody knows. A lot of people think the day you stop bleeding is the first day of the cycle, and that's not true. First day of a full bleed, day one. So in a general cycle, and everybody is slightly different, but if we're looking at a 28-day general cycle, day 1 to day 14, or the first half of the cycle, is called the follicular phase. And this is considered a lower hormone phase. We don't have progesterone happening at all during this phase. Partway through, we start getting some estrogen, which actually makes us feel strong and motivated. And then at day 14, we hopefully ovulate or thereabouts. And a little bit more testosterone, again, gets us really motivated. So this first half of the cycle, we often can feel amazing. This is where we can have more energy. Yes, if you have a hard period, you might not feel great for the first 2 days. But in general, it's this lower hormone phase where we feel motivated. We don't tend to have as many food cravings. We don't feel bloated. We can push harder. We recover better with exercise. Now, in science, you can read big meta-analysis on this, and they'll be like, there is not enough evidence to say this, you absolutely need to be doing this. But the science does say some people definitely feel very different between the two halves of their cycle. So if you also see scientists going, there's not enough evidence, what they're saying is there's not enough really deep research to say, absolutely, everybody is this way, and we have to go by these guidelines. But just because the science isn't absolute doesn't mean for a lot of us, this can't have a major impact. So this is where you have to trial it on yourself. So that first 2 weeks, you can push hard, you recover better, you sleep better, your body handles carbohydrates better, hypothetically. So this is the real push phase. And I use that in weight loss as well. I will do cyclical dieting with people where I do 2 weeks of really strict eating, because most of us have motivation for about 2 weeks. And men, anybody can do this. You don't have to have a menstrual cycle. But so 2 weeks of really pushing it. And then the second 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle, where progesterone starts getting high. Progesterone is what makes us more tired, more bloated, craving more food. It does increase our body temperature, which means we burn more calories, but we easily compensate for it eating wise. And especially that week before a period, the fourth week, we often aren't overly motivated, and we do want chocolate and sugar. And so those second 2 weeks, with my clients or with myself, ease off a bit. I wouldn't do strict weight loss those 2 weeks. I let them kind of back it off a bit. You don't exercise quite as hard if you're not feeling up to it. If you're feeling up to it, you can do it. So there's this easing off, and it's this beautiful pushing cycle for 2 weeks and easing off, recovering for 2 weeks. And okay, yeah, if you're an elite athlete, that's not going to fit into your schedule, but the majority of people listening to this are definitely probably not elite athletes. So what do you want clarification on with that one?
That's great. That's a great overview in preparation. Certainly, as each decade, as you said, has gone by, I've noticed too that in a way I feel fortunate for my cycle in that it's a reminder. Otherwise I could just be like on go and go. And it's actually a reminder. So, and this is a way I've had to like change my mindset around my cycle as well. Instead of fighting it, just being like, embrace it. And there's all sorts of degrees. I know there are women who actually like change their work schedule and all that. And if you're blessed to be able to do that, that's amazing. And I think that was more a part of our society back in the day. Like I remember my mother-in-law they wouldn't participate in gym class and usually boys and girls were separated then too, but
Yeah.
also, they would specifically say to the young women, you're not going to participate at this time.
Yeah.
And that certainly changed by the time went to school, went to gym class. And so I think it's actually by embracing it, it's a way of getting back into the rhythms of life that are natural.
Yeah, and we think about like seasons and,
Mm.
everything is cyclical. And I get so excited thinking about that. And it's okay, but just it's okay to rest and it's okay to rejuvenate and let your body, recover. It's like sleep. There's this huge thing about, oh, I only sleep this many hours a day. And I'm always, whenever anybody, wants a badge of honor for sleeping less, I'm always, as the naturopath in me, I'm like, that's a nightmare. Like, we know by research, you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Some people need even more. But for every hour you're missing from 7 or 7.5, your body function really is struggling. Even if you're used to it. I went out to dinner last night. Someone was like, oh, I only ever sleep 6 hours. But in the same breath, she was like, I can't lose the rest of this weight I'm trying to lose. What should I do? And
Yeah.
she was only sleeping 6 hours and having alcohol every night. And I was like, well, you don't really need me to go over your diet. I just need you to change. It's these two other things they needed to do. Not sleeping enough allows higher cortisol. Again, cortisol puts the brakes on weight loss and it creates inflammation. We often talk about people being too inflamed. Poor food choices create inflammation, too much stress, not enough sleep, too much alcohol. All of those things create kind of an inflammation in the body, and feeling healthy and an immune system that's functioning well doesn't want to be functioning with all that inflammation because it's going to suppress the immune system as well. So, the more we take care of ourselves and we do that slow and then push, usually everything starts functioning better. We've just got so removed from cycles and okay patterns. I know there's a movement back to it, but yeah.
For me, it's finding the happy medium because I have a good friend who teaches about how to follow those cycles like
Mm,
really in depth, and it's really beautiful. But I have a hard time applying it to my life and partly my personality. So I'm trying in my life to balance it out. Like, you can have that go-getter mentality
mm,
and part of you, but where can you work in the balance? And what I've found too is that I feel better, like I can actually feel the highs of the highs in
mm.
healthy ways, but also like for a couple years now, I've strived as much as I can schedule it a spa appointment right before my cycle. And it's
Nice.
heavenly. It's so much better because like my body's ready for it as opposed to at the beginning of my cycle, it's like, why are we here?
Yeah.
Let's
I
do
don't
this.
need a massage right now.
Yeah,
Mm,
and it feels so much better, and the results are, I mean, whether you're measuring weight or even just outer accomplishments or physical exercise accomplishments, it just seems to tick along so much better.
so true. And it's not about being perfect. Like we all have, like I teach at university one day a week and I have to get up really early to go do it. I love waking up and just having an hour to myself, and I have my warm drink, be it coffee or herb tea, and usually coffee. And, um, and I got to kind of rush that morning, and then it's a big teach. And yeah, it doesn't fit my perfect rhythm, but it's one day a week. And then I know when I get home, I compromise and I don't schedule anything after I teach, or I take a nap on those days that I do that big teaching thing. And it's just about finding those little things. And it's not about being perfect by any means. Life gets in the way. You go to parties or have functions where you're totally out of rhythm from what you want to be doing. But it's about that 80%, often health is that 80% consistency, 20% whatever else is going on. If you're getting 80% of the right thing for yourself, you are doing an incredible job, right?
Definitely.
And it's not rocket science. It's not really technical eating or really naturopathic treatment. It's sleep and getting out and moving the body. And again, exercise is this amazing thing, but find the exercise that works for you. Find the exercise that makes your body feel amazing. A lot of, and again, I'm going to talk about women here, women as they hit their 40s and 50s and into perimenopause, often the exercise that kept you lean and made you feel great doesn't feel as good once you hit your kind of mid 40s and beyond. And you need to change things up. We need to be doing more strength training as we age. We know we have all this research on that. But often just flogging ourselves and really high intensity all the time. You meet these women, they're like, I'm doing 5 HIIT classes and I'm doing this and nothing's moving. And it's like, it's because it's too much stress too much inflammation, too much stress. And it's amazing how many women take up hiking and walking, like long walking and rather than the HIIT, and how much better they feel and their body relaxes and then releases some of what they don't need anymore. So it's also about shifting when you need to shift, trying new things, because what used to work in the 20s and 30s often doesn't work in the 40s and 50s and beyond.
It's a good opportunity to explore, and there's so much available these days, which is a huge benefit.
Yeah. And we were talking about this before we started recording. I'm a huge fan of Pilates, and I'm a naturopath, and all my friends are like yoga teachers, and I'm always like, oh, go do yoga. I just don't cope with yoga. I know it's good for my body and it feels good when I finish, but I psychologically don't enjoy it. And I used to kind of push myself to do that. And then I was like, I'm an adult. I don't have to do this if I don't want to. And I swapped to Pilates and I was like, oh, I enjoy this the whole hour and I'm getting probably similar benefits. And it's okay to not like what everybody else likes. Does that make sense? I think we get so, I should do yoga. I should meditate. I'm a terrible meditator. I am a great meditator while I run, like I do, or while I walk by myself or sit in a bathtub. But just to sit and meditate, it doesn't work for my personality. And it took me a long time to let that go and just go, I'll just find where I'm going to do it. So I think it's a really powerful thing to figure out what works for each of us rather than assume what we have to do because that's what society says is healthy.
Definitely. I was just talking to my team the other day about this. Oftentimes so I build online health and wellness programs and, there's online is amazing what you can do online.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But like anything in life, you come up to roadblocks or hurdles. And I've learned when that happens that it's a signal to find another solution. Yeah. And it often, instead of resisting and going, no, I want to do it this way, I want to do it this way, the encouragement, I'll say, to find another solution helps me to see so many other options that I wasn't seeing before.
Absolutely. And things you don't think are going to work are amazing. Yeah. And again, different styles, if we bring it back to the body and weight loss or cycles, different things work different months and different years, different decades. And we have to give our bodies are so much smarter than we give them credit for. We have this, I'm going to be a bit controversial here, the whole biohacking world. I get it. I get what people are doing. We're biohacking, but to me, and this is a female thing, but I'm like, I don't want to hack my body anymore. Hacking to me, I get what it means, but I don't want a shortcut to better health. Like long term, I get that there are improvements, but I really wish we used something like bioenhancing or something just a bit softer, more gentle, but maybe that's more the feminine than the masculine or the yin to the yang. We try to trick our body into things and our body will always work the way around it, right? There's all these little shortcuts people try to do and then they get frustrated. And it's like, it's that slow and steady change of one habit at a time or what? Yeah. Am I making sense?
Yeah. What comes to mind is like the person's like, I got this diet down and I severely restricted my calorie intake and I lost 20 pounds. And then the next week they're like, I can't sleep.
Yeah.
And so the body goes whoop, in the other direction. Before recording, we were talking about we're both working on books. I'm working on revising the book, and you have a couple books in the works. And mine is about body typing, and it's called Universal Self-Care. And so it's about getting to know your own body better so that you can work with it. I say work with it, not on it. And let's talk about elements and the body types. And I know this is totally your realm as well.
Yeah.
And I think this could really help a number of people out there. So going back to ancient Greek medicine, it's in so many cultures, Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, they each have their form of what I call body typing. And they're often based on the elements. Now they choose different elements that they work with, but a lot of them come down to, and I simplify it as earth, fire, air, and water.
Yeah.
A few of them have different ones, but they all kind of disseminate into the form.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so like what you were talking about, your personality and also your astrological makeup. I get this question all the time. Does your body type match your astrology? And I think there are a lot of similarities.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, yes. There are a lot of similarities, but it's not a perfect lineup. And people get really frustrated with like, I'm this, but then it's this. And so, yes, I think there's a big overview of a match, definitely. But I think it also depends, if we're talking astrological, when you get somebody's astrology chart, you can do a calculation of what somebody's elemental makeup is. And so that's really what we're talking about, knowing your dominant fire with, your second element, what's your top element, what's your second element, what are the elements that are missing. I think it's a huge way to work with people and their motivation as well. I find it, yes, their physical body, but also how their mind is working and what feels good. Because as a really dominant fire person, I can run the risk of being really fiery with a client that's really earthy. And my earthy clients need something totally different than this big fiery, just go do this. They're going to be like, yeah, no.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a beautiful psychological tool looking at people's motivation as well as their body type. So I will definitely change language to suit elements, not just someone's physicality. Yeah. How do you use it? I'd love to hear how you really
it's changed over time. Since I've learned astrology, it's another dynamic. I agree, it's not the exact same thing. So for example, my chart is dominated by earth, but my physiology and my temperament are more, I would say, air, fire.
Yeah.
And but I think the underlying motivation is earthy. So motivation is in health and wellness, wanting to create a healthy, stable environment family-wise. So deep down is the underlying earthy motivation, but certainly the other elements come in more on the surface.
Yeah.
And so I think what's interesting, what might help people in this realm is when we're talking about intermittent fasting and exercise, especially we're in the new year, it's how do you keep those habits, those good, healthy habits going? And what I've noticed is that different body types have different approaches, for example, and I want you to add to this totally.
Sure.
So if we start with the earth type, they're really good at keeping a routine. They're really good with routines, but getting started on something, or if they feel like they're depriving themselves, they're off.
Yeah.
They're off.
So true. So true.
How do you encourage someone to, in the intermittent fasting or exercise realm, who's the earthy type of person?
Yeah, with the earths, I really notice, yes, once they're doing it, but to get them over the hurdle to start. I mean, in some earth, Taurus is going to be the hardest to get them to start, but they'll keep going longer. I don't give Earths too many things to do at once. Like
Mm.
in a consultation, I will write, depending on the person, I'll write 2 pages. I do write really big, but I will type a page of instructions for them to do. But if it's a really dominant Earth person, I know they're only going to pick 2 or 3 things that I've suggested, and that's okay. And I actually let them know that by the end of the consult. I'm like, so I've written all of this, but which ones of these have you already picked to try? And a really dominant Earth they'll be very blunt about it. And they'll be like, oh yeah, number 2 and number 4. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just start on that for the next month. Let's just go with the basics. Whereas if you get, a fire person in, you can write a whole list of things, and they're probably going to attempt to do them all. They might not continue it all, but yeah, it's very interesting how you have to approach them and get their buy-in depending on their element. I find it, yeah. Verbally, I change things up, and just, the volume of things. I will give the same volume because I also don't want to underestimate someone's motivation, but I don't expect people to do everything, and I let them know that. Yeah. Yeah.
I imagine that the Earth type, if they have a good buddy system, like someone that is very accountable, like their counterpart, right, is more the air type or even the fire type. That's a
Yeah.
great starter, but they might have a harder time keeping it going. If you
Mm-hmm.
pair them together and you have the go-getter starter and then you have the consistent person, it's like, no, come on, I have it on my calendar. It's every
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah, and you guilt them into making sure they come. And look, I'm probably one of those people in some ways, right? I'm very fire, and but I do well with accountability people and buddies, or I'll pay for. It's the point of paying for something, right? You've put in your commitment, so that you're like, oh, I don't want to waste that money. I've paid it. Let's go use it, right? And I know that sounds really stupid, but when you get, podcasts are amazing and they're free, and great advice. But when people pay for things, they add more, that's that the value to it. So, it's an interesting way of how to get that buy-in for the Earth.
Yes, definitely. Like personal training or gym membership, you're like, I'm paying for it anyways. It
Yeah.
it
Better
can be
use
very
it.
helpful. For the person who air and fire, I find, share similar qualities in there. They'll start, fire may carry through or burn out, whereas the air is kind of like, we'll start, stop, start, stop, start,
Yep.
stop. And I wanted to go over this because we all go through have this challenging, there's the really beneficial side, like we're the quintessential fire type, right? They're the go-getter starter, but they might burn themselves out, you
Do you know
know?
what I find works really well for fire is they got to commit to a goal. Like they have to commit, like sign up for something, be it I'm like, for me, I love exercise. I feel amazing with exercise, but I'm much more consistent if I'm like, oh, I paid to do the Sydney Marathon. So I have to create a schedule to hit my goal. And it's not all about the achievement of running the marathon. For me, it's that I need that carrot in my future that I got to go towards. I can't run without the carrot in front of me. Does that make sense? I think that's a very fiery thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a container also.
Yeah. It's not forever and ever. And yeah, because as a fire and an air would be like this, they want to move on to the next thing. They're going to, I don't want to do the same thing every single time. And if people are into their astrology and they feel like they're not fitting this, I would look at, you got your sun, your moon, your ascendant, and they all play such a big thing. So look at the elemental makeup between those. But I would also I'm a huge advocate for what houses have the most planets and what element traditionally, can I go a little bit astrological here? Is that too technical?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. What element traditionally rules that house? So like the 6th house is traditionally ruled by Virgo. So the 6th house has an earth feel to it, no matter what sign is actually in charge of that house because of your rising sign. And I find the houses have a huge play in influencing those elements for motivation or doing things as well.
So I have a pretty strong stellium in the 10th house.
Mm.
And so what would that be ruled? What kind of energy would that give?
Well, that 10th is naturally Capricorn or naturally Earth. So, and you were already saying, oh, well, I'm quite earthy, and that really adds to it. And so it adds to that, oh, you'd be more likely to work than to go exercise, or you'll forego exercise to get some work done. So it would also be, to trick yourself into that with exercise. There's somehow, I would make it more achievement driven exercise, whether it's martial arts and like going up in belts, or you need, again, like the goal I was talking about, but for you, it would be like this, watching yourself move up a ladder of a goal somehow, so that you feel like you're getting recognition for what you put in. I would flavor it that way.
Yeah, that definitely.
The studios that give you, like my mom goes to a workout gym that's like every 50 sessions, they get like a t-shirt, and they get, there's a little post about them on social media. So they feel like they've achieved, like, achievement driven exercise.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Although I don't necessarily need the belt or the t-shirt, it's internal. Like I know that I've made it to the next level. Like martial arts was one of those, or yoga. It's like, oh, I can finally do this.
This
I feel like I'm
or,
learning, like it as a break from work, even though my mind is working on learning this other physical thing, and I can see the progress that fits. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I have a lot in the first house, but I have a lot in the ninth house. And the ninth, is a very sporty house, but it's also spirituality, search for meaning. And for me, sport and I have Mars there, which can be about how you do your drive and your sport. And for me, I do, like, the first time I signed up for an Ironman wasn't about, oh my God, I'm an Ironman. That's, in like Hawaiian Ironman, I'm talking about. For me, it wasn't. It was more about, where do I have to go spiritually and emotionally? What's the journey going to be like to actually do something that big? So for me, it was this whole spiritual process of doing a physical endeavor, and that was so enticing for me. Where do I have to take myself to go do that? Rather than, oh, I want the medal and I'm an Ironman, and yeah, it's fun to be able to say that, but for me, it was, where did I have to take myself on a spiritual level to get to something like that? And what was I going to learn about myself in that process? And it became very ninth house for me.
Is that more so Mars being the physical active component, and which house it's placed in?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely, with exercise, I pay a lot of attention to Mars. Mars also rules your adrenals. So, exercise does use the adrenals, but we also have to support there. Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't mean to talk about my chart, but I also have the moon in the ninth. So there's that soul food that I got from the ninth house of playing with it like that. And I think if we learn to play with, coming back to all of our health, looking at your Mars is such a part of your physical body, but your moon and how you nourish yourself and how you do food, those things combined are so vital to support our physical health.
That's so interesting. My moon and moon and Mars are in the ninth house as well.
No, let's see. This is why we're friends.
Yes, it makes total sense.
It feels good.
It's like it is the higher, your ultimate calling, North Star kind of mission.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the tricky one are the air type and the water type share a commonality, where they can go with the flow or go where the wind takes them. And that can be a good thing when you're trying to flow in life, but it can be a bad thing when you're trying to stick to something.
Yeah.
How do you work with your air and water type clients in that way to help them with their stick to it?
Yeah, I find the air really wants that variety, right? So they need to be, the other thing I find with air and exercise or health things is, you talked about accountability buddies for Earth, but I actually think the airs need to do it socially, right? Air is about the mind and I mean, some signs are more about communication than others, but they need to be mentally stimulated as well as physically stimulated. So more social sports, or going to the gym where they know there's going to be a lot of other people rather than the home gym, or, doubles tennis, team sport, knowing there's going to be that interaction and stimulation of their brain, I think makes a big difference for them. Water, I get them. I'm trying to think what I do with all my waters. We get them, often waters, if they're like, oh, I don't really want to exercise hard, I don't want to run, or it depends on the rest of the chart, but fluid activities, right? Like people forget, dancing is a sport. Waters do great dancing, get them in the water, get them swimming, or at the beach doing, get them at the beach doing yoga, or they need to. I find waters can be all or nothing with exercise. They'll be great for like a month, and then they'll do nothing for 2 months. So, accountability buddies are good for everybody. But they're more fluid things, I think, make them feel more in tune with their body. But, water isn't, if we're talking about the elements, water is the weakest sign physically of the 4 elements. And I think especially, and if we're going to rank them, we would put Pisces at the bottom. And it's okay for them not to push all the time. And they need that flow and retraction and acknowledging what that feels like. That said, don't freak out if you're a Pisces or Pisces rising. People with super strong, I think we forget about this. People with super strong constitutions, that you meet those people that like literally they eat like crap, they never exercise, or they don't take care of themselves. Nothing ever. They're probably not listening to a health podcast either, by the way. But you might be in relationship with one. But these people that just go and go and go, and they're always fine. Being born with a strong constitution is awesome until you hit about 50 or 60, and then the wheels fall off, and these people don't know how to take care of themselves because they've never had to. They make really hard clients because they haven't had to make changes before. Whereas those of us, and I'm included in this, that have an average to lower constitution, I actually think in some ways that's a gift, because we have to work on our health on a daily basis. We can't, I can push for a while, but if I don't take care, and it's probably how I ended up as a naturopath, I knew I had to be aware and nourish more than the average person. And in some ways, I think it's a gift not to have a strong constitution. Yeah, it's frustrating, but we may be the ones that actually fare better in the long run, hopefully.
Yeah,
hopefully we all fare well. I'm not wishing anything on anybody.
Totally. No, it makes total sense. I've turned that around for myself. Growing up, had like irritable bowel, like serious like skin issues and stuff, and I get a lot of compliments about my skin, but I'm like, fortunately, I had to address it when I was a child, like as a teenager. And so it made me even more aware, like, hey, drinking water really helps. It makes a big difference.
Zinc. Yep. Yep.
And I agree.
Yeah. It's constitutions are interesting, but and it really figuring out what works for you, like as we've talked about the whole time, it's so individual, and it is going to change per decade as well, right? For everybody, not just females.
Yes. There's so much to it. And I think the body typing is a really great entry point. And, if you're into astrology, it can be super insightful as well. But just the body types, earth, fire, air, and water, can give you such a different vantage point to see things from, and to accept, okay, that's a strength, and it also can be a weakness. But I can something I can work with. And what I like to encourage people to think also is that you're not all one type necessarily. You usually have a primary and a secondary. And then the other ones are they're there somewhere,
Yep.
somehow. And so how can you use them to your strength?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the big things is actually knowing what your body types are. If you're finding the elements tricky, not you, because I know you know this, but I recommend people go look at Ayurveda and just Google Ayurvedic quiz on body types and figure out, in Ayurveda, they use the elements, but then they bring it down into what are called doshas.
Mm-hmm.
And the doshas are actually a combination of 2 elements each. And they talk about, we all have all the doshas in us, but in different ratios. And I find the Ayurvedic system is a really easy one to kind of get your head around. There's a lot of info out there on the internet about it. I think the beauty of body types is, and again, like fire, if we go to body types elementally, astrologically, fire is more that triangular, big shoulders, or wider shoulders, more narrow downwards, hips, fiery constitution, a lot of action. They hold muscle pretty well. They can gain weight, but they can lose it pretty quickly. Whereas you have then, your heirs can be tall or short, but they tend to be that more slender, although other things can get in the way of that. They're more like the Vata constitution in Ayurveda, where the mind is really busy, but the body isn't always physically robust. So their nervous system needs a lot of support, whereas the fire, it's the adrenals that need a lot of support. And then we have the earth, which tend to be more square body types. But again, we don't all fit into these exactly, but in general, and earth is about the storage of nutrients and the storage of fuel. And so they can be that denser body build, hold more muscle. They're great at holding muscle, but they would also be great at holding body fat. And again, different, Taurus might be better at that sturdiness than Virgo can have that little feel of a bit of air to it as well. But it's finding the beauty in that shape, right? Like we're not, let me finish with water. So water is more circular rather than the earth that's square. It's that more circular, it's softer. Again, can hold muscle, can hold body fat, can hold fluid. It's just that softer feel to it. And it's not as robust, and again, processing emotions through the body is a big thing for water versus, earth is about the tangible and the practical and the goals. If we're going to go through all these different ideas, and there was something else I was going to get to, and it's like gone out of my brain.
You were talking about the kind of the structure and the image.
Yeah. We're not all going to fit that image, just like we're not all going to fit social media images or what should a supermodel look like versus what should an elite athlete look like. I think one of the most beautiful things we can do for anybody, and I think this is the beauty of Ayurveda or phenotypes and looking at your, in science, we look at endomorph, ectomorph, and mesomorph. And then the combination of those as well. And knowing your genetics, it's funny because we all accept how tall or how short people are, right? We're like, oh, you're 5'2", you're 5'10", and that's great. That's just how we are. Yet some of us hold more muscle or more body fat. Some of us are rounder. Some of us are bird builds, tiny. Yet we don't accept that as easily. It's an interesting thing, or what society deems is beautiful. Yet we all have these beautiful, amazing bodies that have their own strengths, but we don't teach enough about the person that holds so much more muscle, how amazing they are and sturdy and stable for everybody else in their life. An earth person they're that rock of Gibraltar for their family, and they're there solidly to help others. Whereas the waters and that softness is that nurturing, and they're the caretaker. I'm not saying you're not a caretaker if you're not water, but we forget to celebrate how amazing all the body types are. And I think that's a real crime of modern society.
Yeah, I very much agree. That's kind of the heart behind teaching body typing. And
Mm,
I like to think about it this way because usually when we think of body image, we think about women and what women think of themselves or of each other. And but I have in my example, I think of, you tend to see couples and it's like the quintessential opposites attract, right? And I think of my husband and me, I'm more of the air structure, but I can build and hold muscle pretty good too. So like
yeah,
air, fire. And my husband's more of the fire earth. And so he's more muscular, but has, good healthy layer of fat as well, naturally. And it's for that type is really hard. The more earth you have, it's harder to get really lean.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
but I noticed and it's interesting as you see movies come out and like over the decades, who is like the starlet and who is the handsome guy of the time, right?
Mm,
Sometimes I'm like, I do not understand why that is. He's like the cat's meow. Like it is not my type. Cause I like the guy that like has some girth to him,
yeah,
and I think of that sometimes when I see couples that are opposite, like that must be how I think of my husband. Like it's just like I want something to hold on to, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And what we're drawn to, and what we deem as, yeah, yeah. I think society has, lately with social, I mean, we don't want to talk about social media really, but at least there's been some variety lately in social media with, celebrated body types. I have a teenager, so I often, it's really interesting to remember what was deemed whatever when I was a teenager versus, my daughter has gone through her teenage years with, they're all, and again, this is almost on its way out, but, having a good bum, having a good, you know, sorry, I'm Australian, so I say bum, bottom, ass, whatever you want to say. There's been this celebration of more earth, water body types
Isn't that
lately.
interesting?
And it's such a relief in some ways. And the pendulum is going to swing and we're going to go back to something else. But it's
Yeah.
been nice to watch that celebration. But it's been interesting to hear my daughter talk about it because um, it's very different vocabulary to what went on when I was going through high school.
That's interesting that it's all the way over there, I mean, as
Mm,
well. It was helpful when I was a teenager. I spent a year in Brazil, and it was a very good time because here in the United States, I was, not necessarily heavier, but maybe a little heavier on the bottom, let's say. But in Brazil, they're like, we love that.
yeah,
And
and
it
they
was,
celebrate.
yes, and then that time in my life, it was a really good time to help instill like, this is you're okay as you are. And I think, the part of this discussion, even intermittent fasting, as you've mentioned, has gone to such a far extreme in some instances, and especially for women. I think that's what I wanted to help get across is that yes, the science is saying that, and like you pointed out, a lot of the studies are typically done on men. A lot of the science is saying that this is healthy and helpful, but you do at the same time really need to listen to your body. And
Yep.
that intermittent fasting and to me, exercise really go hand in hand. They ha-
Mm,
because they can have such similar effects in how they affect your appetite, your metabolism, your self-image as a result as well. And all message is heard. And please share your final thoughts as well that you got to listen to your body. It's get to know your body and it's okay to question what the idea of
yeah.
healthy is.
Well, I think we need to learn celebration of our body types and our ancestry and what go have, there's so much coming out right now about that. Um, if we come to intermittent fasting, and my final things to say, I probably didn't say this before, but whatever you do, like with exercise as well, a lot of people have this whole thing about exercising fasted in the morning. And if you are doing gentle exercise, if you're off to yoga or Pilates or a walk, sure, It's fine to exercise fasted. If you are doing high intensity exercise, if you're going for a run, HIIT training, if you're going to go do weights, especially if you're a female, give yourself some fuel. The amount of extra fat you're going to burn by training fasted is so negligible. And they're actually coming out with some research I read just last week saying, it's not even as good as we originally thought to train fasted. Give yourself a piece of toast, some fruit, a little hit of carbohydrate before training. You will actually feel a lot better. For females, it turns that cortisol down. You're going to exercise so much better. I was just talking to someone last night about this, who I was like, just eat one date before you train. And she was like, it was unnatural. She said, I cannot believe the difference of how I feel working out by just giving myself some fuel before I exercise. So yes, there are times where you can train fasted. In high-end athletes, you'll specifically train fasted for certain outcomes, but that's well beyond what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing is, if you train fasted especially, please do yourself and your body a favor and eat a meal within half an hour to an hour of finishing exercise. Your body is primed to use the fuels you give it after you exercise and turn it into stored carbohydrates to repair your muscles, to support your immune system, for your brain to have some fuel. Your body will not turn, unless you massively overeat, your body is not going to turn carbohydrates into body fat after you've been exercising. It's going to restock your carbohydrate fuel tanks. And I cry every time I hear about people doing intermittent fasting and they exercise in the morning and then they still don't eat for another 3 hours. You are crippling your immune system. Your mood will be worse. I worry about your hormones. That's probably my biggest takeaway for people is eat properly after exercise. There's so much info out there on how to do that.
That is terrific advice, because I shared the story of how I lost 2 sizes in 2 months, but I was in my early 20s, and that's case in point. I wasn't feeling all the things. Like, I wouldn't do that way now. I definitely get at least, even a little bit of it's not pre-workout, it's more like a vitamin protein shake. It is an option. Totally agree. And especially the afterwards. I definitely feel it these days too, just from personal experience. Like, if I don't have that post-workout, I was feeling, even without exercise, I wasn't getting enough. I was working so much. There you go. There's the work. And I wasn't eating full meals and I wasn't getting enough protein. And I thought that I was just simply overworking myself, which I was, but I wasn't getting enough protein and I was feeling achy. I was feeling tired. I was just getting more and more ragged. And it was simply just replenishing my body with enough fuel. And that is something, speaking of body types, you have to be aware of for yourself. The earth types can tend to be stress eaters, and they're the types that can be like, just, I'm busy, and you forget to properly nourish yourself.
Yeah. And, we don't need to fight our bodies. That's probably one of my biggest things is figure out the rhythms that work for your body. Try different styles of intermittent fasting. Try, if you're having a cycle, look at your cycle and do some reading on how you can feel better with your cycle and listen to the body. There's so many great ways to work with your body. The minute we try to fight our body, which maybe worked in our 20s, it doesn't, for the majority of people, it doesn't work. We need to figure out what works with our body and our circadian rhythms. Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially if you're having cramping and the accompanying experiences, they can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So on my website, tarabauckland.com, you can actually do a body type assessment. And I know you have some accompanying courses that go along with this.
Yeah. I mean, my website, Astrology of Health, I have, yes, I definitely have an elemental lecture that looks at elements. I have another lecture called, I think it's called Cycles of Health. says as a cycle in the word, definitely. And there's a lunar phase cycle workshop as well, or little lecture. But there's articles to go read as well. And then if you're getting really motivated of sports, nutrition, health wise, my naturopathic website is actually just kirsutherland.com.au. And that has more straight, that doesn't have any naturopathy on it, but it has a lot of information or webinars on, working with your cycle, weight loss, all kinds of stuff.
Wonderful. Well, I knew that we'd have a wonderful conversation, that we innately just jive. And I think it comes down to keep working with your body, learn about your body, work with it. Don't necessarily try to work on it and hack it, especially for women out there. I think we share a common message, which is great.
Enhance, bio-nourish your body. That's what I would like to change it to.
That sounds great.
So good to see you.
Wonderful to see you too. And we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.